Hello and welcome to Berwick Speedway's Total Access Show with myself, Scott Frame, and of course Greg Blair. On this week's show, we'll have race action where Peter 𝗘𝗲𝗃 takes on 𝗣𝗲𝗃𝗃 of Glasgow, courtesy of the British Speedway Network when the guys were there a few weeks ago. We'll also recap on that weekend. It was a busy weekend for the boys, 3 meetings in 3 days, and of course our exit in the 𝗘𝗲 Cup we'll speak about, and we'll look ahead to what is a massive meeting for us as we open our Cab Direct Championship season at home to the reigning champions, the Poole Pirates. Greg, it's been a busy time for the club. Obviously, it's been a bit busy for us, hence why we maybe took a couple of weeks off for doing these kind of videos. We've been on marching away on our charity walk for the Ben Fund. But in the meantime, on the weekend that we finished at, it was a very, very busy weekend for the guys. 2 meetings away from home at Edinburgh and Glasgow, and the first leg of the 𝗘𝗲 Cup at home to Redcar. Just to touch on the 2 away meetings, first of all, certainly didn't disgrace ourselves in any way, shape or form. Looking back at the Edinburgh match, it's probably one that I think it's safe to say that most Berwick fans are watching it would say maybe slipped away from us. And the performance at Glasgow, there was a lot of encouraging signs there, I would say, as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the guys were they're working hard. We know that we've heard from, Craig Cook, he's always doing testing. We can see it on social media that he's testing. He's away, he's at Workington at the weekend. They're just fine-tuning things, always trying, to pick up his performance. And everybody's trying their best. Everyone's trying to get there. And I think when the team does click, it'll work out really well. We've gotten these other meetings out the way, and now it's the real deal. Now it's the league that we're after. So promising signs all round, and we just need to keep battering on and getting them home victories.
And it's the first kind of chance we've had to speak about the fact that we made a change in the lineup, and out went Bastien and in came Jack Smith. Bastien, for all his obviously efforts during the winter and attempts to get fit, it's probably quite clear to anybody who'd been at meetings he was struggling for that fitness, and it was going to take a little bit of time to get him going and for him to get race sharp, so to speak. Time that simply the club didn't really have at this point. That's Scott Frame talking, not Berwick Bandits, by the way. But we were kind of short in time in terms of if we looked at maybe Bastien's kind of fitness and the fact that we had 3 tough matches, 3 days in a row. The kind of choice to bring in Jack Smith on a 28-day contract seemed a sensible one by the club for both kind of Bastien's sake and the kind of club's sake. And what I would say is that I've been very impressed with Jack Smith's attitude since he's come in, and he's put a lot of points in the board, more than doing his job, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. And Jack's kind of had a point to prove as well, which is something that's good for him to come in. It's good for Berwick as well, because he was left out. He's not had a team place. He's not had, the phone maybe hasn't rang over the winter. He's got this opportunity. He's taken it with both hands, and it really is showing what he can do and the type of rider that he is. When Jack first burst into the scene, there was a lot of hype about him, which does kind of happen when you've got a parent, like Andy Smith. That's going to be a tough one. You've got to try and fill those shoes. So yeah, a lot of hype went on it, and maybe after a few seasons things sort of dipped down for him again. But it's good to see that he's actually on the rise. He's back up again, and scoring points for the Bandits. Not just home, he's doing it away. So yeah, it's good to see, and he's a fighter, and I think he's getting the grips with the Berwick track as well. So certainly one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I was impressed when he came into the Glasgow team last year as well, when he replaced Lee Compline. It was obviously a big shoes to fill in terms of the points that Lee could get at reserve for them last year as well. And as you say, there's always, because of the nature of the sport in terms of the numbers games and stuff as well, there's always going to be a few that are going to miss out. Jack just seems to be that unlucky one each year. But as you say, it's credit to him that when he comes in to the teams, that he's putting points on the board and certainly getting his name out there, and certainly putting himself in a mix for a kind of permanent contract with the Bandits as well. Unfortunately for the club though, Greg, we managed to beat the Redcar Bears at home, but it was a slender lead, and it was always going to be a tough job to go to the Echo Arena and kind of defend that. But it does mean that we're out of 2 competitions fairly on in the season. which is disappointing. But as you say, full focus now is on the championship, and the season starts in earnest come Saturday. But I think now, in terms of from the club's point of view, and obviously the fans will want this as well, it's mega important now that we make a good fist of qualifying for the end of season playoffs, isn't it?
100%. You know, we do not want the same thing that happened last year. You know, the English school holidays weren't even finished, and the Bandits were. That's not what we want. The boys will all know that. They're all wanting meetings. You know, at the end of the day, they don't get paid. You know, when the season finishes, they're not getting paid. So the guys are going to have to go out there and they're going to have to do it. And yeah, focus is now, I think, in a way, you know, not trying to make excuses or anything like that, but they've not, everything is serious. I'm not saying, you know, that the BSN, the knockout wasn't, but now it's like, if you mess this one up, boys, that's it. You know, you've got to keep going. There's no room for error. We've seen errors happening on track. You know, we've seen these chains slipping. You do get chains breaking every now and again, but, you know, it's been quite a few riders that we've seen that's had mechanical gremlins, and some of these ones can be workshop related. So now is the time to step the game up and really screw the head. And, you know, one thing that I was, you know, amazed at is was down at Plymouth with BSN on Saturday. 𝗔𝗰𝗃𝗃𝗃 filling in for Kyle Howarth. What a meeting he had. You know, for anyone who didn't see the full meeting at Plymouth, everybody was bumping through the bumps. They were all over the place, this, that, and everything else. 𝗔𝗃𝗃𝗃 was riding it like it was a different track to him. He was so smooth and, you know, getting himself a maximum there. An incredible effort for himself. So confidence for 𝗔. Plymouth, when we go there, everybody will be asking 𝗔 what he's doing with the bikes. But, you know, that's the other thing as well, Scott. You know, our riders taking on guest bookings to tracks that we've not been to yet is a little bonus, because if they have a good one, they can say, this is what I did. If they have a bad one, they'll say, don't do this. You need to do that. So guest bookings for our boys is a major positive. And yeah, fingers crossed we can get more of that, because it kind of just helps us out a little bit.
Absolutely. Before we preview Poole, the match against Poole on Saturday evening, and we'll speak a wee bit about the British final as well. We'll catch up with some race action from Glasgow when the Bandits were there a couple of weeks ago, and action from Peter 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃.
Heat number 7. And it is a good start there from the rider in white. Peter 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 makes a good gate, but coming up the inside is the rider in red, Kyle Howarth. And Kyle Howarth gets himself into the lead, but back comes 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 to the party. 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 holding it wide here, winding it on down the back straight. And Kyle Howarth and Peter 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 having a real ding-dong here. Howarth in the lead, back comes 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 again down the back straight.
Yeah, great switch back from 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 there to get the better of Howarth. Howarth pushing him all the way. He's trying to switch back up.
He's coming back. Kyle Howarth back into the lead. 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃's going to go again around the outside of this first and second turn. Down the back straight. 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 hasn't quite got the speed. Kyle Howarth holding faith with the inside line here, starting the final lap, and 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃's back in the lead.
𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 back around the outside. What a ride there. He's going to stay and hang out on the outside. Howarth bulked down on the inside, can't get any speed X in the corner. This looks like 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃's.
Last roll of the dice around this final turn here, and this is going to be a win for Peter 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. It's a 4-2 to the Berwick Bandits, because 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 comes in third place. But what a battle between Peter 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 and Kyle Howarth here. Some great racing at Ashfield this afternoon.
Thanks to the BSN for their coverage. Obviously, you were there yourself, Greg, with the BSN as the Bandits took on Glasgow, as we said, probably a bit unlucky in the end, and it was a good battling performance from the boys. But just to touch on that just slightly, what I would say as well is that looking at the top two in terms of Peter and Craig, the further as the months and weeks go by, we can see them getting better and better, coming into a wee bit of form. Obviously, Drew's hit the ground running. The club put up some stats which are incredible from Drew from the start of the season. He actually messaged me and asked, I'd be interested to know what my stats were after 25 races last year, which I sent him, and he was a bit shocked at the difference. It was a good 2 points of difference, and even at that, it's not a bad start considering where he was at the start of last season as well. But I would say there's positive signs there from the guys heading into the championship season as well, as we've said. But just looking at the way kind of Peter's riding the bike and stuff, we've now got a lot of guys who are doubling up as well. So even though we might not be in the BSN or the Knockout Cup anymore, these guys are kind of racing all the time, and more bike time means they're bike sharp for when they're in Bandits colours. And as we head into the match against Poole on Saturday, we've seen through the BSN series that Poole are beatable. They're maybe not the invincible Poole team that we've seen in the past. Getting through the BSN by the skin of their teeth, really, winning only one match in that. So it's quite incredible that they've got through as the kind of lucky loser. But looking at it, I genuinely don't feel, when I look down the 1-7s, that the Bandits have got anything to fear here. There's got to be a real air of positivity going into Saturday's match as well, and get that first win on the board early doors in the league.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it's very doable. Poole aren't they're not at the strongest that they have been in the past, which is a good thing for the Bandits. You know, I've said this time and time again, and I've told riders this time and time again. You know, when I've been captain, there's a lot of riders who don't get the opportunity to ride Berwick often, and Poole are one of them teams that don't.
Yep.
Now, bar Richard Lawson and 𝗬𝗂, there's a lot of them boys that maybe don't particularly like Shielfield. Them big straights can be very daunting. All you have to do is just stand at the second bend when you go to Shielfield Park on a Saturday night and look at that and think, wow, that is a long straight. So a lot of the Poole riders probably won't be as keen. Obviously Richard Lawson, who scored maximums for us as a guest booking, and 𝗬𝗂, who was in Bandits colours last year. You never know what's going to happen, but I think that if I was to sit on the neutral fence, I would say that it's Bandits are favourite going into Saturday night.
Absolutely, and I'll just give out the teams as we're talking about them here. So, slight change in the riding order for the Bandits on Saturday evening as Sam Hagan moves into the number 2 position alongside Craig Cook. So it'll be Craig Cook at 1, Sam Hagan 2. Drew moves to number 3 with Daniel going to 4, and Peter Kilderman at 5, Dale Wood 6, and Jack Smith at 7. For the Pirates, they'll have Richard Lawson at 1, Tobias Thompson, to Anders Rowe, Zach Cook, 𝗬𝗂, Paul Stark, and new signing Daryl Richens at number 7. The shake-up in the order there, obviously we've seen Sam for the start of the season, and what I would say, I think the meeting before we did the walk against Edinburgh, it was probably the hardest ridden 4 or 5 points I think you'll ever see in your life. There's no lack of effort from Sam. It's just it didn't seem to be clicking for him. And I actually think moving to number 2 is going to do him the world of good. Probably less pressure on at the number 2 position than what it was when he was racing at 3 possibly. And you've got a guy like Craig who's coming into form now as well. And we've seen him in the British final as well, mixing it with some of the biggest names in the sport really. I think that's going to do him the world of good, and I like the pairing of Drew and Daniel at 3 and 4 as well.
Yeah, I think that for Sam, going back to Sam being at number 2, I think that's a good one for him. He's, not been getting the best of gates, but when he's always challenging. I think when Sam gets out in front, he's going to be a tricky one to pass because he's fast, and we've seen it many times that Sam does look like that he's not so much struggling to find a move to pass him, it's just he gets held up a little bit. And of course, with this unusual weather that we've been having, where it's been so warm at Berwick, and other reasons with football being on, it's been difficult for the track staff to get as much water into the track. It's been running quite slick. It could just do with that little bit of a bite on the outside, and I think that would suit them. But again, hot weather, trying to get water on it, it can be quite tricky at times.
Yeah.
But you say about the 3 and 4, the pairing there, Drew moving to number 3, that's it's a good move for Drew. You know, I think at some point in the season, Drew, Craig, and Peter could quite easily swap about. You know, they could go all over the place, and I think that there could be a little bit of a confidence build for Daniel going in at number 4 as well. It's going to pick him up a little bit. And I think that
actually like with Daniel that he's coming into heat 14 there, because I think Daniel sometimes with a wee bit of added pressure on him, I think sometimes that's when you see the best of Daniel, and obviously he's got that responsibility there because we've been strong with Drew at number 4 getting into that heat 14 as well.
Yeah, exactly that. Number 4 is it's one of them ones where you go out and if you've had a bad meeting, you can turn it around personally in heat 14, because that is your, as a 4, your job is to go out and win heat 14. So I think that Daniel will take that upon himself, and he'll enjoy that captain's role. Number four, heat 14 could end up pushing us over the line and getting a meeting win. So it's a good place for him to be.
Yeah, it'd be nice for him to go out there and make heat 14 his own if he's going to be at number 4 for a while anyway as well. But as you say, looking down the pool team, like Zach Cook at number 4, that will be directly up against Daniel. That's a tough one for him. But as you mentioned there, Richard Lawson guested for his last year, ironically, when Louis was injured. And then obviously Louis coming back to Berwick as well. We know what these guys can do around Berwick. They're a potent top 2. But as I keep saying, with Peter getting the gaps week by week more and more with the kind of Berwick track, and Craig coming into a bit of form, and as you say, he's practicing, he's at Leicester, he's at Bellevue, he's at Workington, he's putting in the time in the laps to get to his best form, and it's good to see Craig in a good place like that, really.
It really is. You know, on Craig's day, when he's doing well, he's nobody can beat him. You know, the way that he rides the bike, he's very, very talented, and he's very particular in the way that he has his bike set up and what he does with it. So yeah, I think that going forward, I think that, you know, once Craig does get everything in the right, everything's laid out in front of him and it's all perfect, he is going to be an out and out number 1, potentially one of the strongest number 1s in the championship.
Yeah, because we can see that determination from the starts as well. We've seen that against Edinburgh, especially, where you just seen that was the kind of Craig Cook of Ols, as we spoke about, and definitely I think we're going to see the best of him over the next few weeks as well. Just touching on Craig, obviously Craig and Drew were part of the British final. We will talk in more depth on our Talk Speedway podcast in regards to the British final as a whole. So once you've watched this, please go over to the Talk Speedway channels, and basically you'll catch myself, Greg, and Mitchell Davies speaking this week. One of the major topics will be the British final, because it was absolutely incredible. But just looking at Craig, just missing out in the kind of semi-final, he needed a big last ride, but he won a heat in the middle there. Drew kind of struggled a little bit, 2 points on the night, 15th. I was quite shocked at that, really, Greg, because Drew going into that meeting, obviously, as you said there about his form, obviously Plymouth's a completely different track altogether to Bellevue, but his form's been good, but probably the points that was on the board didn't really reflect how the effort that he probably put in. When you seen him, he was grabbing a handful of throttle. You could see him, he was trying to get more and more out of the bike. It kind of tells you, Greg, you'll know as an ex-rider, that there was maybe something that wasn't quite working the way he wanted it to, the way he was kind of strangling the throttle at times, a couple of times down the straight. There was obviously something going on there, but
I think Anders Rowe nailed it in the interview that he had, and it was a fact that any rider listening to this now will be able to say exactly that. You can go to Bellevue one day and you can score a bag full of points, and you can go the very next day and get nothing. It's crazy, and I think it'll be interesting. Like you said, that I think it'll be very interesting that we've got two Grand Prix back to back there, because we could see a completely different final.
Yeah, I think from Craig's point of view in the British final as well, I thought he was quite unlucky with the draw in terms of the gate positions. Like it was very few kind of winners from the outside, and the outside 2 gates in the kind of first half of the meeting. And unfortunately, Craig was kind of stuck out there for the first half of the meeting, and then but once he got to with the inside gates, we've seen probably a better version of Craig Cook, really, didn't we?
Yeah, we did, and it's just that's the way the cookie crumbles, and you know.
Pardon the pun.
I didn't even realise that. What belter. But no, you know, you could, without going into too much depth about it. Of course, we're going to be talking about it on Talk Speedway, but yeah, you just have to look at, you know, Leon Flint, for example, track grades. You know, for what Leon did and the points he scored, I think he did pretty bloody well. Even the fact that he had track grades all the time. But we'll be going into more depth than that.
Absolutely, well, yeah, you're right. So, in terms of total access, all it's left to say is if you want to attend Saturday night's meeting, get your tickets now at berwickspeedway.com/tickets. Get there and get in early, and make sure that you're there at Shieldfield Park on Saturday night. It is a massive meeting that's set to be an absolute cracker. Weather's set for it to be fantastic as well. It's set to be an absolute barnstormer, really, and we really need to get off to a good start. So we need the help of the fans to do that. So we want to see the place packed out on Saturday evening for a massive night of Speedway for the boys. And until next week on Total Access, goodbye.